Hey everyone, Jeremy L. Jones here, author of Ruins of Empire. Enjoying the story so far? Want to help this little project get even bigger and grander? Are you ready to help make Ruins of Empire the worldwide sensation that it was always meant to be? Then get out there. Leave reviews on iTunes, Stitcher, or your podcast app of choice. Share us on Facebook or Twitter. Shout about us at random strangers. It all helps get the word out, except maybe that last one. That's more like the work of a crazy person, and besides, endlessly harassing total strangers about this science fiction saga is my job.
You are listening to Ruins of Empire, Saturnius Mons, Book 1 of the Ruins of Empire Project, a serial podcast novel by Jeremy L. Jones, read by the author and Tyler Murphy. The story so far. Arrested by Vince LeMan, the members of the Human Reconnection Project are locked aboard the shuttle until they can be taken back to Earth to stand trial. Isra forced Kronos to come clean about passing information about the moon's refineries to the corporation, and in the process they learned that their meddling with the refineries' systems has created a potentially explosive situation. Viekko and Althea managed to figure out a way for the group to escape, and on their way out, Isra cut Kronos out of the group.
Chapter 24. Once the corporation was no longer a player on the world stage, people's hearts turned again to deep, ancient hatreds. They looked on their allies, not as new friends, but as old enemies. In its signature flash of optimism and ingenuity, the corporation sold off their weapons to the highest bidder and stoked an inferno that made the global revolution look like a dying campfire by comparison. From the Fall. The Decline and Failure of 21st Century Civilization by Martin Raff.
Viekko peeked his head out of the cargo bay door of the ship. The camp was all but deserted now, as was the shuttle. A breeze blew off the Legia Mar with a strange, otherworldly whistle, and blew dead leaves from the surrounding forest through the camp. A few uniformed runners scrambled through the temporary shelters on some mission or another, but it was abandoned otherwise. It was as if humanity had just been swept away in the night and left their remains to be consumed by nature. Once he was sure that they could move through the camp in relative safety, Viekko motioned for Isra and Althea to join him. Isra pressed against him, too close for his comfort, and said, "They most likely took the crates to the armory. It will not be hard to retrieve. I will grab our things. Althea, come with me. I will need your help in collecting it all. Viekko, we need transportation." The hovercrafts, troop transports, and lifters parked by the sea were mostly gone, taken out to ship more men to some horrific fate on this moon. There were only a couple left, but one in particular caught Viekko's eye. It wasn't much, just a small loader with space for 4 passengers, a small cargo bed, and a grabbing arm built on one corner. Viekko made one more scan of the area. "Okay, I see something. Do what you need to do and meet me by the coast." With that, he bolted from the cargo bay at a dead run toward the vehicle he selected, resting on a platform by the sea. It was an older model, with a few patches of fading paint clinging to a rusted frame. The engine mounted on back was attached. That was all Viekko could say with certainty about it. Viekko plopped himself behind the controls and started the warm-up sequence. The engine whined and the hovercraft shuddered and rose a meter or so off the pad. Some distance away, an irritated voice called, "Hey! What the hell do you think you're doing?" A Marine rushed toward the hovercraft, pointing a rifle, a real one this time with real bullets, aimed at Viekko's head. "Sir, who are you? You're not authorized." Viekko flipped a switch to heat up the thrusters. "It's okay. LeMan said I could borrow it. I'm with the Human Reconnection Project. We're helping each other. Just one big team. Haven't you heard?" The Marine stepped in front of the loader. "Sir, I cannot let you leave until I receive official verification." Viekko flipped another switch to activate the stabilizers. "Well, by all means. Call him up and verify. Verify to your little procedure-filling heart's content, but I'm taking this." The Marine continued to hold the gun on Viekko and flicked his arm to expose the screen on his own aerosuit. Viekko pretended to pay him no attention as he worked through the checklist, but his eyes were already looking for a quick way out if needed. The Marine tried to use the radio when movement in Viekko's peripheral caught his eye, and Isra's deadly serious voice said, "Nothing sudden, please. Lower your weapon and move out of our way." Isra approached with a small arsenal of 3 automatic rifles and Viekko's holster slung over her shoulder. She held a 4th rifle trained on the Marine. Althea ignored the gunplay and tossed her black medical bag in the back seat before climbing in herself. She sat low in the seat in case Isra and the Marine started swapping slugs. The Marine bared his teeth at Isra while holding the rifle at Viekko. "I can't do that! That is corporation property! Tell your man to stand down!" Viekko stood up in his seat with his hands in the air. "All right, let's just calm down. Nobody do nothing permanent here." They all stood in that silent standoff for a few moments. The Marine aimed a shaking rifle at Viekko, while Isra stood ready to send a headshot through the Marine's brain. Another Marine jogged up from the direction of the camp. His uniform, age, and brisk pace made Viekko think officer class. As he approached, the unfortunate grunt nodded toward Isra. "Captain, these people are attempting to steal one of our vehicles." The captain scowled at Viekko and the loader. "Who are you? Get out of there." Viekko eased himself back in the seat and flicked a few switches on the control panel for dramatic effect. "Captain, glad you're here. I need a quick word." The captain pulled a sidearm. "Get the hell out of that vehicle." Viekko examined the officer for a moment. Deep lines in the man's face and graying hair suggested a man in his 50s. If he had served his time in the Corporation Marines, it meant that he might have some intelligence. Independent thought and common sense were rare commodities in the Marines, but there was just enough to keep the whole operation from falling apart. And it tended to be concentrated in a select few. "Captain, listen to me," said Viekko, leaning over the side. "That attack that Laban's got going, it's going to be a disaster. I'm talking a Force 5 blast storm." The captain eyed Viekko for a moment, and then the 2 women, and back to Viekko. "What makes you say that?" Viekko motioned out over the water. "By now you've heard about the city on the other side of the sea, and you've heard that the Marines already got pushed out. What you haven't heard is that civilization is fixing to self-destruct, and I ain't talking metaphorical. They are currently sitting on enough fuel to shoot 100 ships off this moon, and there's at least 1 man interested in blast-off. Trust me, you don't want to be here when that happens." The captain looked at Isra, as if for confirmation, and said, "Go on." Viekko continued. "We've got a narrow window to try and stop it. It's a long shot, but I need this vehicle. Either way, I would spend less time worrying about us and more time worrying about an emergency evacuation. I'd say the chances are better than good that we don't come back from this." The captain considered this. "Marine, stand down. Report to the shuttle and order an evacuation sequence." "Sir?" said the Marine. "Do it." The soldier hesitated for a moment before running toward the shuttle. Althea and Isra boarded the loader while the captain watched. "I couldn't say anything to Laban, but the amphibious assault was as brash as it was ill-planned. How bad is it going to be?" Isra handed Viekko his shoulder holster with his 2 guns, and he took off his jacket. "You ever see what a proximity mine does to a squad? Well, multiply the explosive by several million tons and see what it does to an entire army." "How much time would you estimate we have?" the officer asked. Viekko slipped on his shoulder holsters. "Hard to say. Be on the safe side and get ready to hit sky 5 minutes ago." "And if you're wrong?" Viekko pulled his white khaki jacket back on. "If I'm wrong, there'll be plenty lining up to take their piece of me. Tell you what, I'll make sure you get first in line. Avoid the rush, as they say." Viekko gunned the engine and left the captain behind. Viekko steered the vehicle over the waves of the sea and in the direction of the city. He pushed the throttle on the hovercraft as hard as it would go. The engines whined and shuddered like they could blow out the back at any minute. Droplets from the supercooled water of the Legia Mar sprayed up and stung his face. He squinted at the sun just a few degrees above the western horizon. He didn't even bother to inform the officer about the Venganto. Well, he was likely to find out in due time. Isra sat next to Viekko in the passenger side, using her Eros computer to hail Halifaco. She repeated the call. "Halifaco or any member of the Perfiduloi. This is Isra Jacario. If you or your people are in the refineries, you must fall back. A major corporation force is descending on your position now. Repeat, this is Isra Jacario. Your position is not safe. The outsiders are coming to force you out, and the refineries are growing unstable. Repeat. The first indication that they were close was when the refinery smokestacks started popping up above the horizon, obscuring the setting sun. When the rest of the complex started to come into view, Viekko could see the full magnitude of Laban's insanity. Virtually everything the corporation had on Titan was parked just off the coast. At least 10 troop transports, a few heavy cargo movers, and several medium to light gunships all hovered above the water less than a kilometer from the beach. Althea shielded her eyes from the spraying water. Are we too late? Viekko turned the wheel to veer the hovercraft to the left. For those poor bastards, yes. They made a wide arc to avoid the corporation fleet. Viekko throttled down and brought the loader onto dry ground. He drove along the coast for a kilometer or so and turned toward the refineries until he brought it alongside the gray wall surrounding the compound. He throttled down farther and moved just above a walking pace near the barrier. Althea stood up and looked at the refineries beyond the wall through a set of binoculars. I can't see anyone there. Isra stopped transmitting. There is no answer from Halifaco. She tapped some icons on her screen. If he has his transmitter, it is linked to the satellite network. We can find his location inside the refineries. Yes, he is there. Viekko jumped out of the loader and unholstered his gun. Can we get to him before something terrible happens? Isra stepped out and picked up an automatic rifle. Depends on how long he has been in there. We need to confront him. Althea, stay here. If this ends poorly, there may be need for emergency medical care. Althea took a seat in the driver's side and nodded. Okay. Viekko ran his hand along the wall. Keep close to this. If the worst should happen, it'll stop the worst of the shockwave. Isra, let's go. Viekko took a step back, jumped, and scrambled over the wall. Isra had more difficulty, but she fell to the ground on the other side not long after him. They sprinted across the open ground into the tangled mix of steel, and Viekko stopped to scan the area through the sights of his weapon. Any clue where he might be? Near the center of the complex, said Isra in between gasps for air. Okay, lead the way, but be careful. This place was a death trap when everyone thought it was working perfectly. No telling what kind of hell it's become since. Viekko felt even more unease walking between the tanks and through the maze of steel pipes. The entire apparatus groaned with increased strain. Pops and hisses became more frequent than they were in the past. Every time Viekko stepped next to or over a pipe or moving piece of machinery, he listened close for any sign that he would have to jump out of the way. Isra crept forward with her rifle raised. She occasionally stopped to consult the readout on her ARM computer. Viekko, meanwhile, watched for an attack on their flanks. Far away, beyond the straining, hissing, and cracking machinery, he noticed the smell of hundreds of Corporation Marines sweating in their aerosuits beneath Corporation blue uniforms, getting stronger with each passing moment. They came to a spot where the narrow walkways opened up to a passage where Viekko and Isra could walk side by side with room to spare. They moved a few meters before Viekko heard voices through the constant mechanical cacophony. He raised his hand to indicate to Isra that they should pause. Isra checked her Eros computer and nodded. They agreed without saying a word. Halifaco was just up ahead. Viekko unholstered his second handgun. Isra shouldered her rifle, and they continued with an added measure of caution. They found Halifaco shouting orders to 6 Perfiduloi warriors. There were rows and rows of rusty metal wheels, and the forest people ran back and forth, turning them according to some order that was out of Viekko's understanding. It had been a while since these valves had been manipulated. It often took 2 or more warriors to turn the ancient valves. Halifaco watched and consulted the device Kronos gave him at the dinner. It projected a smaller version of the hologram, just a few centimeters from the leader's face. Viekko came up behind him with both guns aimed at the small of his back and shouted, "Halifaco, stop right there. Put that thing away. Tell your people to stand down and come with us." Halifaco, with his back to Viekko, didn't move or flinch. "Viekko, it is dangerous here. You should not have come." "Stop! Everyone stop!" yelled Isra, waving her rifle at the Perfiduloi men and women executing Halifaco's orders. She released the grip and let the weapon hang by a strap around her shoulder. Halifaco, listen to me. There is another way. Halifaco turned and smiled at her with the look of a condemned man who has accepted his fate and was looking forward to the next world. It was a strange, calm smile that made Viekko's trigger fingers twitch. There is no other way, said Halifaco. The Houston and his people see us only as slaves, as animals to work and die. Fei, qui, dajoy! At the order from Halifaco, his people went back to opening and shutting valves. Isra raised her gun and held the barrel just a few centimeters from Halifaco's face. Tell them to stop. I will kill you. Halifaco looked down the barrel of the gun as if daring her to carry out her threat. Do what you must. That's where they stood for several seconds, eye to eye, both people sizing each other up and measuring their resolve. But you didn't need to have Isra's preternatural ability to read people to see that Halifaco had a death wish, and he wasn't going to budge. Isra lowered her gun. Please, we can help your people. The frantic activity among the others stopped, and one of them shouted, Completa! Halifaco's smile grew, and he turned to walk away from Isra. All promises, endless promises. He reached a spot on a pipe with a ball valve lever as long as Halifaco's forearm. He stopped there and gripped the lever. My people do not need promises. They need freedom. Viekko, still keeping his guns trained on Halifaco, for all the good it would do, said, Don't do what I think you're going to do. Didn't you hear Kronos earlier? Don't you understand that you will destroy all of Titan? Halifaco cocked his head. That is what you say. That is what the Houston says. How can I trust any of you? He paused, waiting for an answer. Viekko looked at Isra, who seemed to be scanning the entire contents of her brain for a response. Halifaco shook his head and sighed, as if he knew there was no answer she could give, nor one he wanted. We have ships, Isra blurted. Halifaco stopped and looked at Isra, confused. Viekko lowered his weapons as well, waiting for an explanation for that outburst. We have ships, Isra repeated, to take you to Earth, or elsewhere. We have enough space for all Perfiduloi. We can take your people away from this place. It was an act of desperation. Isra couldn't honestly believe there was a way to persuade Laban to shuttle every single Perfiduloi off this rock. But Halifaco paused as he considered it. It gave him some time, and Viekko took in the entire situation. The rest of Halifaco's people watched now, and a couple of them, Viekko noted, were cradling assault rifles taken from the Marines. In this place, a few stray bullets could be as disastrous as what Halifaco had in mind. He'd have to work fast to incapacitate the madman, and get in a position where he could disable the ones carrying guns. More shouting somewhere in the distance drew everyone's attention. It came from the direction of the Lagia Mar. The invasion had begun. Halifaco turned to glare at Isra. I will not trade one slave master for another. Before Isra could stop him, Halifaco opened the valve. The rush of moving liquid made the pipes vibrate, and a deadly silence was punctuated only by the hiss and whir of the machines and the shouts of the Corporation Marines getting closer and closer. For a moment, Viekko thought Kronos could have cooked up the story about catastrophic failure as a means to deflect from his apparent treachery, or, at very least, it was an exaggerated product of an overactive mind. Then every tank, pipe, condenser, and boiler groaned and rumbled. The ground shook as if a sleeping giant from somewhere below had just woken up with a major hangover. Iru! Kuri! Yelled Halifaco, and he took off before either he or Isra could react. The 5 Perfiduloi sprinted after him. There was a loud pop, like a firecracker going off, followed by the sound of crashing metal. Above, the tanks and smokestacks started swaying. What is happening? Asked Isra, turning her eyes upward to the shuddering towers. I don't know, but I don't think we want to be the last folk here trying to figure it out. Go! Run! Now! Viekko turned and sprinted back the way he came. He leapt over banks of pipes and charged through whatever open areas he could. Behind him, the metallic screech of steel being torn apart seemed ever present and getting nearer. Somewhere above, the sky lit up as one of the smokestacks belched flame into the air. Viekko resisted the urge to look at the destruction behind him and kept his mind focused on the path ahead. He left the tight confines of the refinery and paused. For a moment, he worried about Isra. He focused so much on getting himself out that he never stopped to check if she was still following. She was, and she wasn't far behind him. She sprinted past him, nearly taking flight across the open field. Viekko turned and ran after her. The aerosuit felt like it was ripping his muscles apart with every movement, and the place where he took a scrap of shrapnel to the side flared up like he tore it open again. Even so, he pushed himself harder. The first explosions from the refinery echoed off the wall. Viekko reached it in time to give Isra a boost over. When he scrambled up the side himself, the whole world was lost in a bright flash of white light. The force of the shockwave threw him the rest of the way over, and he fell headfirst into the soft ground on the other side. When Viekko's eyes refocused, he saw the remains of a fireball form a mushroom cloud towering over the gray wall. Althea's face appeared over him, and she yelled something he couldn't hear above the ringing in his ears. Gradually his hearing recovered enough to hear, "Viekko! Viekko, are you okay? Can you hear me?" Viekko coughed and sat up. The ground was covered in scraps of metal and clumps of earth. The shockwave pushed the hovercraft several meters back into a tree, and the windshield was shattered. Isra was already in the driver's side trying to start the engines. Halifaco and his people were clustered together against the wall a few meters away. The rebel leader of the Perfiduloi propped himself up on his elbows and gazed in absolute wonder at the destruction he created. Two of the warriors pulled him to his feet, but he never looked away from his apocalyptic handiwork. He patted both of his men on the back and spoke to them. Viekko didn't have to understand the words to realize he was congratulating them on a job well done. Viekko got up and brushed himself off. The light was fading, but there was just enough to see something rising from the direction of the city. They were specks at the moment, but there were dozens of them, and they rose as one, like a swarm of wasps, looking for the poor sod reckless enough to throw rocks at their nest. Viekko pulled Halifaco back by his fur cloak. "You damn fool! You went and brought the Venganto down on you. Now they'll kill every single one of you." Halifaco pulled himself away. "Then my people will defeat those demons. They will not be able to hurt my people after this night. We will no longer be forced into slavery by fear." Viekko grabbed Halifaco again and tried to pull him toward the hovercraft. "Althea! Come on! We've got to go before those things get here!" Isra struggled with the controls when they arrived. "Come on, you bastard! Work!" she yelled, pounding the control panel. Halifaco pulled himself away again. "I will not leave. I created this battle. I intend to fight it." Viekko jumped into one of the back seats and leaned forward, screaming above the roar of explosions. "Ain't nothing good gonna come out of staying here. Come with us or you will die." Halifaco turned back to the burning refineries. "Then that is the will of the Compañía." Isra fired the engines, and the hovercraft lifted off the ground. "The Houston was right about outsiders after all," said Viekko. "Nothing comes from them except more death and destruction." Isra throttled the engine and sped south, leaving Halifaco looking at the fire and clouds of smoke with an air of triumph. He and his men turned and ran into the trees as a throng of Venganto grew close. Isra gunned the engines around the wall and burning refineries and steered out into the open sea.
You have been listening to The Ruins of Empire, Saturnius Mons, the first book of the Ruins of Empire project. The Ruins of Empire podcast was written by Jeremy L. Jones and produced by Sean Vincent. Cover art was by Nick Martin. Music was Broken Reality by Kevin McLeod at incompetech.com, licensed under Creative Commons 3.0 license.